A hidden camera in the nursery exposed my mother-in-law's dark secret plans. It's funny, isn't it? The things you think you'll remember forever, the moments that define you. For me, it wasn't the wedding day or the day my daughter, Lily, was born. It was the sterile click of a forgotten button, the silent blinking of an LED that changed everything, turning my entire world into a cracked and smudged mirror. And hey, if you're feeling this story, if it's hitting you in the gut like it did me, do us both a favor, will ya? Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and share this with anyone who's ever felt the ground shift beneath them. And definitely drop a comment down below. I need to know I'm not the only one who's lived through this kind of hell. My name is Mark, and until about 6 months ago, I thought I had it all. A decent job in IT, a house in the suburbs of Denver, you know, the kind with a meticulously mowed lawn and the swing set in the backyard. A wife, Sarah, who was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Smart, funny, beautiful, with a laugh that could chase away any storm cloud. And then, of course, there was Lily, our little miracle, our perfect, tiny daughter. Life was good. It was the kind of good you see in commercials, the kind you almost don't believe is real until it's yours. And then, like a rogue wave, my mother-in-law, Carol, showed up. Carol wasn't just a mother-in-law. She was an entity, a force of nature, really, but not the good kind. More like a Category 5 hurricane dressed in sensible slacks and apparels. She lived about 3 states away, which was, frankly, a blessing. We had a polite, distant relationship. Occasional calls, holidays where she'd fly in, make some pointed comments about my tie collection or Sarah's choice of paint colors, and then leave. It was a system that worked. Until Lily arrived. Suddenly, Carol was a fixture, not just visiting, but moving in. Sarah, recovering from a difficult birth and overwhelmed with a newborn, was incredibly vulnerable. And Carol, with her patented blend of faux concern and iron will, swooped in like a hawk. "You need help, darling," she'd coo, already unpacking boxes in the guest room. "I can't possibly let my daughter struggle like this. Mark, you'll be so much more focused on work with me handling the domestic chaos." Domestic chaos. That was me, apparently. At first, I tried to be gracious. I really did. We had a spare room and Sarah was exhausted. Having Carol there meant Sarah could sleep a little longer, meant meals were magically on the table. But Carol's presence was suffocating. Every decision, from what brand of diapers we used to how I folded my shirts, became a subject of intense scrutiny. "Are you sure that's best, Mark? Sarah always preferred X." Or, "Lily's skin is so delicate. You really should be using organic cotton onesies, not those synthetic things." It was constant. Sarah, bless her heart, was too tired to fight. She'd just give me that weary look, the one that said, "Just let it go, Mark, for now." But it was eating at me. I felt like a stranger in my own home. My wife, my baby, my life, all being subtly, systematically taken over. Carol had a way of making you feel incompetent, of making you doubt your own instincts. And the worst part was, I could see Sarah starting to internalize it. She'd second-guess herself, ask Carol's opinion on things she never used to, things that were so fundamentally ours. The nursery was our sanctuary. We'd spend months painting it, picking out the perfect mobile, arranging the tiny clothes. It was a space filled with hope and love. Carol, of course, had opinions. "This color is too somber, Sarah. Lily needs bright, cheerful hues, and that bookshelf is terribly cluttered." She'd rearrange things when we weren't looking, her subtle sabotage disguised as helpful gestures. I'd find Lily's favorite plush toy tucked away in a drawer, or a stack of baby books I'd carefully curated hidden behind a pile of her own magazines. One evening, I was in the living room, trying to catch up on emails. Lily was finally asleep, and Sarah was reading in bed. Carol was in the kitchen, humming loudly as she cleaned. The house was blessedly quiet for a few minutes. I glanced at the baby monitor on my laptop. It was supposed to be a live feed of the nursery. I'd set it up myself, a little peace of mind, a way to check on Lily without having to tiptoe in. But tonight, something was off. The image flickered, then stabilized. It showed the crib, the changing table, the mobile gently swaying. But there was a strange angle. I zoomed in. It looked like it was coming from somewhere high up, near the ceiling. I knew I hadn't mounted it that high. I went back to the box the monitor came in. It was a standard setup. Then I remembered a conversation Carol and I had a few weeks ago. She'd been talking about security, about how she'd installed a few extra measures in the nursery to ensure Lily's safety. I dismissed it as her usual overbearing nonsense. But now, my blood ran cold.
I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Carol appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face a mask of mild inquiry. "Everything all right, Mark?" "Yeah, fine," I said, my voice tight. I walked towards the nursery door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to see. I needed to know. The room was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the nightlight. I scanned the ceiling, and there it was. Tucked away in a corner, almost invisible against the white paint, was a small black dome. A camera. Not ours. Panic began to set in. I looked back at the monitor on my laptop. The angle was definitely from that dome. But why? Why would she install a second camera? It was already creepy enough with the one we had. I picked up Lily's favorite teddy bear, a worn, fluffy thing with one button eye missing. I held it up to the camera just to see if it reacted. Nothing. Then I noticed something else, a faint red light blinking rhythmically. It wasn't on our camera, it was on this new one. A recording light. She was recording, always recording. The implications hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just visiting, she wasn't just being overbearing, she was watching. I backed out of the nursery, my mind racing. What was she doing? Was she just monitoring, or was there something more? The thought of her, in her sensible slacks and pearls, secretly watching our most intimate moments, watching our baby sleep, it made my skin crawl. I went back to the living room, my hands shaking as I picked up my phone. I needed to call Sarah, I needed to tell her, but as I looked at her sleeping face on the monitor, our monitor, the one we installed, I hesitated. How could I even begin to explain this? The sheer violation of it all was overwhelming. This was our home, our daughter, and she had turned our nursery into a surveillance zone. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage, but beneath the rage, a cold, hard knot of fear. What was she planning? Why this elaborate secret surveillance? My mind conjured up all sorts of terrible scenarios. Was she gathering evidence for something? Was she trying to prove we were bad parents? Or was it something darker, something I couldn't even begin to fathom? I sat there, staring at the blank wall, the rhythmic blinking of the tiny red light on the hidden camera echoing in my head.
The silence of the house, once a comfort, now felt heavy with unspoken secrets. The trust I'd placed in my wife's family, the assumption of good intentions, it all shattered in an instant. The image of Lily, so small and innocent in her crib, being watched by her grandmother, by someone I'd tried to welcome into our lives, was a betrayal so profound, it made me sick. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing for certain. My life, the life I thought I had, was over, and I was standing on the precipice of something I couldn't possibly have prepared for. The feeling of dread was absolute, a suffocating blanket that settled over me, leaving me breathless and utterly alone, with a terrifying, dawning realization. This was just the beginning. The blinking red light. It was a tiny beacon in the darkness, a silent scream in the quiet house, and it seemed to pulse in time with my own ragged heartbeat. I couldn't shake the image, couldn't unsee the small black dome nestled in the corner of the nursery ceiling, a sinister eye watching our most vulnerable moments. Carol. Her saccharine voice, her helpful suggestions, her invasion of our home, it all coalesced into a chilling, deliberate act of espionage. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, a primal urge to rip that camera out of the ceiling, to shatter it into a million pieces. But a cold, calculating part of my brain, a part that had suddenly sprung to life, told me not to. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand. I moved through the house like a ghost, my footsteps silent on the plush carpets. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. I found myself checking every corner, every vent, my eyes darting, searching for other hidden eyes. Was this just the nursery, or had she extended her surveillance to other rooms? The bathroom? Our bedroom? The thought sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. I pictured her, hunched over a screen somewhere, her face illuminated by the glow of stolen intimacy, cataloging our lives. What was she looking for? What did she hope to find? I walked into the kitchen, the scene of Carol's recent humming and clattering. The dishwasher was running, a low rumble that seemed to mock the silence of my own internal turmoil. I opened cabinets, peered behind spice racks, my movements frantic but quiet.
I was searching for evidence, for any sign of her operation. A router I didn't recognize, a hidden hard drive, a logbook. My hands brushed against a stack of mail on the counter, Carol's usual assortment of junk flyers and solicitations. I shuffled through them, my gaze suddenly snagged by an official-looking envelope addressed to Carol, but marked urgent, private, and confidential. My hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the flap. It was a letter from a private investigator. My breath hitched. Private investigator. I sank onto a kitchen chair, the letter trembling in my hands. The letterhead was from a firm I'd never heard of, based out of Phoenix. The language was dense with legal jargon, but the gist was horrifyingly clear. It detailed an ongoing investigation, a fact-finding mission concerning potential parental unfitness and custody concerns. It mentioned surveillance logs, photographs, and audio recordings. It spoke of evidence being compiled to support a future legal action. My vision swam. Custody, unfitness. They were building a case against me. Against us. A guttural sound escaped my throat, a strangled cry of disbelief and rage. Sarah, Lily, my perfect little family, the one Carol claimed to cherish, was being targeted by her. My mother-in-law, the woman who had inserted herself into our lives under the guise of love and support, was actively working to tear us apart. The fake concern, the suffocating help, the invasion of privacy, it all made a terrifying kind of sense now. She wasn't just being overbearing, she was orchestrating a hostile takeover of our lives, aiming for the ultimate prize, Lily. I reread the letter, my eyes burning, trying to absorb every word, every accusation, every chilling implication. It mentioned specific dates that coincided with Carol's recent visits, her extended stays. It spoke of observed parental lapses and environmental risks. What lapses? What risks? Had she twisted innocent moments into damning evidence? Had she fabricated scenarios? My mind raced back to every interaction, every perceived mistake I might have made, every tired moment Sarah had endured. Had Carol been meticulously documenting it all, waiting for the opportune moment to strike? The sheer audacity of it was staggering. She had orchestrated this entire charade, this carefully constructed facade of grandmotherly devotion, while secretly plotting to remove Lily from her care. The thought of her whispering poison into Sarah's ear about my shortcomings, about our perceived inadequacies, made my blood boil. But then I remembered Sarah's exhaustion, her vulnerability after Lily's birth. Had Carol preyed on that, subtly undermining my role as a father, making Sarah question my capabilities? The investigator's letter also mentioned a planned meeting with Carol in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That meant she was still actively gathering information, still observing, still reporting back. She hadn't completed her mission. She was still here, in my house, breathing my air, pretending to be the loving matriarch, while simultaneously orchestrating our downfall. The hypocrisy was sickening. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound jolted me. Carol was in the living room. I could hear her faint, tinny voice on the phone, probably some gossip session with her friends. She was oblivious to the bomb I just unearthed. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to act, to confront her, to expose her. But the investigator's letter loomed, a stark reminder that I was outmatched, outmaneuvered. I couldn't just accuse her without proof, without understanding the full extent of her plans. I needed to be smart. I needed to be strategic. My mind, usually focused on code and algorithms, was now desperately trying to compute a strategy for survival. I walked back towards the nursery, my steps slower, more deliberate. The hidden camera was still there, its tiny red light a constant, infuriating reminder. I looked at Lily's crib. She was sleeping soundly, an angel of innocence, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. My heart ached with a fierce, protective love. I would do anything to keep her safe, to keep her with us. I opened my laptop again, bringing up the feed from our own baby monitor. I watched Sarah, asleep in their room, her face peaceful. She was exhausted, worn down by motherhood, and I now realized my Carol's subtle manipulation. I couldn't burden her with this yet, not until I had a clearer picture, a solid plan. If I told her now, in my agitated state, she might panic, or worse, confront Carol prematurely, giving her the advantage. I needed to gather more information. I needed to know what Carol was doing, who she was talking to, what evidence she had collected, and I needed to find a way to neutralize her, to stop her before she could inflict irreparable damage. The investigator's letter was a roadmap, of sorts. 2 weeks. That gave me a deadline.
I went back to the kitchen counter and carefully placed the investigator's letter back with the junk mail, ensuring it looked undisturbed. My hands were steadier now, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I needed to play along, to maintain the illusion of normalcy while secretly gathering ammunition. It felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm. One wrong step, and everything would plummet into darkness. I stood by the window, looking out at the dark suburban street. The houses were quiet, their windows glowing softly, each one a little world unto itself. And in one of those worlds, my world, a sinister operation was unfolding. I thought of Carol, her feigned concern, her calculating gaze. She was a master manipulator, and I had been blind to it for months. The guilt gnawed at me. How could I have been so oblivious? How could I have let her get this close, this entrenched? I thought about my own role in this. Had I been too passive? Had I let Sarah carry the burden of dealing with her mother alone? Had my focus on work, on providing, made me less attuned to the emotional undercurrents in our home? The self-recrimination was almost as painful as the betrayal. A sudden noise from the living room, Carol's muffled laughter. It sent a shiver down my spine. She was right there, just beyond the kitchen door, her presence a constant, insidious threat. I had to be careful. Every word I spoke, every action I took could be interpreted, twisted, and used against me. I walked over to the baby monitor and turned it off. I couldn't bear to watch Lily sleeping, to see her innocent vulnerability, knowing she was under constant surveillance. I needed to create a plan, a counter-strategy. But how? I was an IT guy, not a private investigator or a lawyer. My expertise lay in fixing broken systems, not dismantling deeply entrenched family conspiracies. The investigator's letter mentioned photographic evidence. Where would Carol keep those photos? Did she have a secret stash? I scanned the kitchen again, my eyes lingering on every surface, every drawer. It felt like a treasure hunt, except the prize was not gold, but the preservation of my family. I decided to start with Carol's belongings. She had a large suitcase in the guest room, packed with her clothes and personal items. It was a long shot, but I had to start somewhere. The thought of rummaging through her things felt like a violation, but in this case, I was the one who had been violated. I waited until I heard Carol move towards the bathroom, the sound of running water indicating she was settling in for the night. Then I crept out of the kitchen and tiptoed down the hallway towards the guest room. The door creaked slightly as I pushed it open, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. The room was neat, almost obsessively so, reflecting Carol's meticulous nature. Her suitcase lay open on the bed. I began to search, my fingers sifting through carefully folded sweaters and neatly arranged toiletries. I opened every pocket, every compartment, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I found journals filled with Carol's neat script, detailing her daily activities, her thoughts on parenting, her opinions on my cooking. It was a chilling read, a window into her judgmental mind, but nothing directly incriminating. Then, at the bottom of the suitcase, beneath a pile of scarves, my fingers brushed against a thin manila folder. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled it out. It was labeled Project Lily. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Lily, crawling, sleeping, playing, and us, Sarah and I laughing, arguing, eating dinner. Candid shots, taken without our knowledge or consent. There were also printed emails, carefully curated snippets of conversations with Sarah, highlighting her stress, her exhaustion, her occasional moments of doubt. And then I saw it, a few photos of me looking tired after a long day at work, me with a half-eaten plate of food in front of me in moments of frustration. Each one was a calculated piece of evidence, designed to paint me as a neglectful, incompetent father. There were also audio recordings, labeled with dates and times. I picked up one of the small USB drives. I knew I shouldn't listen. I knew I shouldn't delve deeper into this darkness, but I had to. I had to know what she had captured, what she was using against us. I pocketed the USB drive, my mind reeling. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a nosy mother-in-law. This was a full-blown, meticulously planned campaign to steal my daughter. I closed the suitcase, trying to make it look as undisturbed as possible. I left the guest room, my mind a storm of rage and fear. The weight of the folder in my pocket felt immense, a tangible representation of Carol's treachery. I walked back to the kitchen, the hum of the dishwasher a steady, oppressive drone. I needed to process this. I needed to figure out what to do next. The investigator's letter had mentioned a meeting in 2 weeks. That meant I had a small window to act. But what action could I take? Confronting Carol directly would likely backfire. She was too cunning, too prepared. I needed evidence, irrefutable proof of her intentions, and a way to counter her narrative. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder resting on the polished wood. I looked at the photos, at Lily's innocent face, at Sarah's tired smile. My heart ached with a profound sense of violation. She had stolen our privacy, our peace, and was now aiming for our daughter. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had ever experienced. It was a betrayal of trust, of family, of the very concept of a grandmother's love. I picked up one of the audio files, my finger hovering over the play button on my phone. My resolve wavered. Was I ready to hear her voice, to hear her plans laid bare? I knew I had to. I needed to know the full extent of her conspiracy. I pressed play. The static crackled for a moment, then Carol's voice, clear and chilling,
filled the quiet kitchen. "He's so easily distracted, always buried in his computer," she said, her voice laced with a condescending amusement. Sarah's completely overwhelmed. You can see it in her eyes. "He doesn't appreciate what he has. He takes it all for granted. That's why I'm doing this. It's for Lily's own good. She deserves a stable environment, a parent who truly prioritizes her. I just need a bit more proof, a few more incidents to solidify the case. Then we can finally get this done." My blood ran cold. Get this done. What did that mean? Was she talking about the legal action mentioned in the investigator's letter? Was she referring to taking Lily away? The chilling calmness in her voice, the detached way she spoke of my family, as if they were pieces on a chessboard, made my stomach churn. This wasn't just about discipline or parental guidance. This was about a calculated move to sever our connection to Lily. I listened to more of the recording, my hands clenched into fists. She spoke of her conversations with Sarah, how she had subtly planted seeds of doubt about my involvement, my capabilities as a father. She detailed how she had observed my routine, my work hours, twisting them into signs of neglect.
It was a symphony of manipulation, a masterpiece of deceit, all orchestrated by the woman I had welcomed into my home. The clock on the microwave read 11:47 p.m. The house was silent again, save for the faint whirring of the refrigerator. I felt a profound sense of isolation, a crushing weight of responsibility. I had stumbled into a war zone, and I was the only one armed with the truth. But the truth, I now realized, was not enough. I needed a weapon. I needed a plan that was as cunning, as ruthless as Carol's own. I looked at the USB drive, at the folder labeled Project Lily. This was my arsenal, but how to use it? The investigator's letter was a clear indication that Carol had hired professionals. I was just a regular guy, fighting a battle I didn't understand. I closed my eyes, trying to push down the rising tide of panic. I thought of Lily's smile, of Sarah's weary eyes. They were counting on me. I couldn't falter. I couldn't let Carol win. But the sheer scale of her deception, the depth of her malice, was almost overwhelming. It felt like I was staring into an abyss, and I had no idea how to climb out. The red blinking light in the nursery seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the unseen threat that loomed over my family. I had discovered the truth, but the real fight, the fight for my daughter, had just begun. And I had a chilling premonition that it was going to be a brutal, unforgiving battle. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was a tense, coiled spring, ready to snap. I had to be ready. I had to be more than ready. I had to be strategic. I had to be unforgiving. The night was far from over, and the true horror was only just beginning to unfurl. My gut twisted with a cold certainty. This was a fight for survival. The weight of that folder, the USB drive in my pocket, it was a physical manifestation of everything I'd lost, everything that was being stolen. Sleep was a distant memory. I stayed in the kitchen, the harsh overhead light buzzing like an angry hornet. Every creak of the house, every distant siren felt amplified, a soundtrack to my own unraveling. I kept replaying Carol's voice in my head, the casual cruelty of it, the complete lack of remorse. For Lily's own good, it was a twisted justification, a veneer of maternal concern over a predatory instinct. She saw Lily not as a grandchild, but as a prize, a trophy to be claimed. And Sarah, her own daughter, was merely a pawn in her game, weakened and vulnerable, easily manipulated into believing whatever narrative Carol spun. I traced the lines on the investigator's letter again, the Phoenix address a cold, impersonal marker in this deeply personal hell. Potential parental unfitness, custody concerns. These weren't abstract legal terms anymore. They were weapons aimed directly at my heart, at the core of who I was. My life, my marriage, my ability to be a father, all being dissected, analyzed, and weaponized by my own mother-in-law. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. She had infiltrated my home, my family, under the guise of love, and was systematically dismantling it from the inside out. The thought of confronting her, of screaming, of throwing the folder in her face was incredibly tempting. It would be a release, a cathartic explosion of all the rage and betrayal churning inside me. But the investigator's letter was a constant, chilling reminder of the stakes. A premature confrontation, fueled by emotion,
would only play into her hands. She was prepared. She had lawyers. She had evidence. She had a plan. I, on the other hand, had only just scratched the surface of her machinations. I got up and walked over to the window, the cool glass a small comfort against my heated skin. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawns. It was the picture of suburban peace, a stark contrast to the war raging within my own home. I thought of Sarah.
Hours passed. The sun began to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pale gray and pink. The house remained silent, the threat of Carol's presence a palpable, suffocating weight. I had listened to enough. I had seen enough. The picture was devastatingly clear. Carol was not just an overbearing mother-in-law. She was a calculated, ruthless adversary, willing to go to extreme lengths to gain custody of Lily. I gathered the photographs, the investigator's letter, and the USB drive. I needed a plan, a real plan. I couldn't fight her in the court of public opinion or by engaging in a tit-for-tat of accusations. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof of her intentions, her manipulation, and her intent to remove Lily from our care through legal means. The recordings were crucial, but they needed context. They needed to be presented in a way that would be compelling to a judge. My mind, usually so logical and structured when dealing with code and systems, felt scattered, overwhelmed by the sheer emotional devastation of it all. But I forced myself to focus. What did I have? I had proof of her surveillance, her recording of private conversations. I had proof of her intent to build a legal case against us. I had proof of her deceit. The investigator's letter mentioned a meeting in 2 weeks. That was my deadline. I had to act before that meeting. I couldn't let her solidify her case any further. I needed to preempt her. I thought about the private investigator. Carol had hired him. Could I hire one too? Could I turn her own tactics against her? The thought was both appealing and terrifying. It felt like sinking to her level, but perhaps it was the only way to win. I looked at the time, 6 a.m. Sarah would be waking up soon. Lily would stir. The illusion of normalcy had to be maintained. I couldn't let them see the turmoil I was in. I carefully put all the evidence back into the folder, then placed the folder back in the suitcase, trying to make it look exactly as it had been. I closed the suitcase.
the click of the latches echoing in the stillness. I left the guest room, my footsteps heavy, my body feeling like lead. As I walked back towards the kitchen, I heard a faint sound from the nursery. Lily. A soft whimper, the gentle stirring of a child. My heart lurched. That sound, that innocent sound, was what this was all about. It was my anchor, my motivation. I would not let Carol take that away from me. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking. The house was beginning to stir. The smell of brewing coffee would soon waft from the kitchen. Carol would emerge from her room, her smile perfectly composed, ready to start another day of deception. And I would have to play my part, the unsuspecting husband and father, while inside, a storm raged. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't undo the betrayal, the invasion, the emotional damage, but I could fight. I could fight for Lily. I could fight for my family. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about protecting the one thing that mattered most. I sat down at the kitchen table, the folder resting in front of me. The silence of the early morning was broken only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the faint, rhythmic beat of my own determined heart. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now tempered by a grim resolve. I had faced the darkness, and I had found the truth. Now, I had to find the strength to face the battle that lay ahead. The first breath of this new, terrible reality had been taken. The fight for Lily had begun. The air in the kitchen felt thick with unspoken threats and a desperate, unyielding love. My exhale was long, ragged, a quiet promise to myself, to Sarah, and most importantly, to Lily, that I would not let this monster win.